One of the beautiful things about exploring chess more deeply is that you'll begin to notice thematic parallels between what's happening on the board and what's happening off the board. If you open your receptors to these connections, it'll speed your chess growth, and it will also help you use chess to take on broader life issues. I've already spoken about the idea of investment and loss, having a relationship to the learning process that allows you to turn bad moments to your advantage, and that ultimately frees you to take risks, play free, without obsessing about immediate results. A chessic manifestation of this idea can be seen when you're confronted by aggression. People are often thrown off by another's hostility or destructive impulse. It's easy to get scared, locked up, emotionally overwrought, and paralyzed when someone attacks us or tries to hurt us in one way or another, especially if they're exceedingly skilled in their form of aggression. We've already seen how Tal's relentless attacks would disarm opponents, but there's another side to this coin. If you're a counterattacker by nature, you should learn to use the energy of someone like Tal against him. The ideal response to aggression is to learn how to turn it against itself. We'll explore this idea, which of course relates to all aspects of life, from a few different angles. This next game is about using adversity. This is a battle between two of the greatest attackers of their time. Rudolf Spielmann was actually my favorite player when I was a young boy. His beautiful sacrifices, willingness to take risks, and romantic style inspired me to search out the art in chess. In this game, though, he runs smack into Paul Kurs, a powerhouse Estonian grandmaster, who's considered one of the strongest players to never become world champion. One of the problems with imposing your will in a chess game is that a calm, present opponent can turn the energy of the attack against you. e4, e6. Spielmann has the white pieces, Kurs has the black pieces. This is the French defense. d4, d5. Knight c3, defending that pawn on e4. Knight f6, e5, knight fd7. This is a typical pawn structure in the French. Black has given white a little bit more of a spatial edge in the center, but he's planning on counterattacking with the move c5 to undermine the base of that pawn chain. f4, which is guarding that e-pawn because eventually his d4 pawn will be leaving. c5, going on with the black plan. D takes c5, knight c6. Here white plays a3. There was no reason for black to take back that pawn immediately because there's no way for white to defend it. After knight c6, a3, white's threatening maybe b4, which would lock down that c5 square. So here, bishop takes c5. And here Spielmann jumped into the attack with queen g4, eyeing that g7 pawn. Here castling would be a little bit of a mistake, because it's moving right into the line of fire. Kurs played the move g6. Obviously the dark squares are somewhat weakened, but it's a solid structure, and who knows, maybe the black king will castle queenside. Knight f3, Kurs played a6, calmly preparing b5. Queenside expansion. Bishop d3, b5. Here Spielmann saw that Kurs might have had the idea of playing b4, opening up the queenside, and then after a takes b4, knight takes b4, bringing the knight into the game, undermining that bishop on d3. He wanted to stop that, so he played the move b4 himself. A fine decision, a little bit aggressive. Now the white king won't be safe on the queen side, so the king's pretty much definitely going to go kingside if he castles. So it makes sense then for bishop a7 to be played, keeping on that g1 square, so the white king is trapped on e1. Now Kurs jumped further into the attack with the move h4, threatening h5. Remember that idea, when your opponent makes a pawn move on the king's side, usually he'll give you a weakness, a target to go after. g6 has given a target, so h4, h5 is with the idea of opening up that king's side using the g6 move. Here, Kurs continued with his blockading plan. He played h5, the natural queen e7 move, continuing development. Now black might play bishop b7 and castle queenside if he wants to. Who knows? And now, in this position, the battle really begins. Spielman played the move f5. Aggressive, going right after it. This is the kind of move that a guy like Spielman or Tal will play often. The position is normal, white has a good position, black has a solid position, maybe black's pawn structure is a little bit better. In the long term, black might be able to get an advantage here. So what do? They begin the attack. Remember the principle. What is the space left behind? f5 is a pawn sacrifice. Taking it with the e-pawn would be a mistake, obviously, because it gives up the d5 square. This would be great for white. Taking it with the g-pawn is also a little bit problematic. For one thing, it opens up the white queen coming down to g7. But first, white can play the move bishop takes f5, taking back the material. This is a piece sacrifice based around the idea of e takes f5, knight takes d5. White gives up a piece, but jumps into the aggressive square. Now the black queen has to move. If the queen goes to e6, do you see what white plays? Look for a fork. Very good. Knight c7 check forks the king, queen, and incidentally the rook. But after the king moves, you'll take the queen, and you're winning. If the queen goes back to f8, you also have a fork with knight c7 check. This time you're forking just king and rook, but that's good enough. After you win the rook, you'll be up material. The king is stuck in the middle of the board. For example, after king d8, knight takes a8, moves like bishop g5 check are coming. This king's going to be in a lot of trouble. So after knight d5, black's best move is something like queen d8. But here, the problem is that white can jump into the attack further. Queen g7. And you can see why black's in big trouble. This rook on h8 is hanging. The only move is rook f8, and now white brings another piece into the attack. What do you do with white here? Well done. Bishop to g5, very strong. And the queen is trapped on d8. The only move for black is f6, and I'm sure you can see that this position is completely winning for white in a number of ways. Just an example, queen g6 check forces the move rook f7, and then you can attack the pinned piece with e6, winning a rook. It's all over. So you can see that if g takes f5, bishop takes f5, Spielman has worked out the tactics. Here, you can't really take back the bishop comfortably, but now you've opened up your king side, and the next move for white will be to move like queen g7. This is uncomfortable. But one thing you can be sure of, if you are playing the black pieces in a position like this, and your opponent has played a move like f5, is that he's spent a lot of time, he's had to, calculating out what happens after g takes f5, bishop takes f5. He's been forced to do that because he's really pushing the envelope here. He's made a move which has to be tactically correct in every position. Often when people do that, they'll overlook a quiet, simple move that takes advantage in a more subtle way of the space left behind. Here, the e5 square has been weakened. Kurs played the very powerful move, bishop b8. And if I had been playing the white pieces here, after f5, bishop b8, I would immediately know, oh boy, my idea has been refuted. Now I have to hang on. Bishop b8 exposes the weakness of the e5 pawn. Here, Spielman played f takes g6. Now, what do you play with black? No, that's not the best move. Try again. Very good. The best move, knight d takes e5. When deciding which knight to capture with in this kind of position, knight c takes or knight d takes, a rule to think about is that you want to keep as many centralized pieces as possible. The knight on c6 is a little bit more centralized, a little bit more active. Knight d takes e5 is the right move. Here, black's threatening a powerful, discovered attack. You see what it is? Yes, if it's black's move, knight takes d3 check, forces the king to move, and bishop takes g3 wins the queen. Here Spielman played g takes f7. His best move would have been queen g5. We'll analyze this later. Instead, g takes f7 was played. White's trying to keep his initiative. After g takes f7 check, queen takes f7, knight g5, threatening the queen. Also, opening up white's defense of the d3 square. So after knight g5, there's no longer a way to win the queen with a discovered attack because the queen can recapture the bishop itself. Here, black has to get out of the attack and continue to mount pressure with a counterattack. Kurs played the very strong queen f6. This is a move which functions on a lot of levels. For one thing, it gets out of the attack of the knight. For another thing, it opens up the queen's X-ray attack on this knight on c3. When this knight on e5 moves, queen takes c3 check, forking the rook and the king will be in the air. The other thing it does is very important. It stops white from castling. You see, the white king is stuck on e1. He would love to castle kingside, jump over to h1, be anywhere but the middle of the board. But queen on f6 hits that f1 square. And remember, a king can't castle through check. So queen f6 functions on many levels. A very strong move. Here Spielman played rook f1, acknowledging, okay, I'm not going to be able to castle. I might as well continue with my attack. If you think knight f3 check is the right move, I can't really blame you. It looks very tempting, and it's not at all bad. After knight f3 check, queen takes f3 though. Queen takes c3 check, king d1. You don't really have too much time to take on a1 because queen f7 check is coming. That's the only problem. This is a difficult tactical move to find. It's black's move. Take your time here, put everything together, see what you can find. Remember, the material is even. So if you win a piece or you win an exchange, you'll be able to convert the advantage. Also, you're looking for counterplay, for attacks. White is threatening rook takes f6. You have a potential discovered attack with your bishop on his queen. But if you take on f3 or on d3, he'll get out of the way with the queen and stop the check. Kurs played the very powerful move, knight g4. And suddenly we see that white's position has fallen apart. All of his aggressive moves have created weaknesses, which are going to undermine his game. The knight on c3 is weakened because of the aggressive move b4. The dark squares are wide open. The e-pawn is gone because of his play f5. The quiet move, the calm move, bishop a7 back to b8 is opening up this threat on the queen on g3. The knight on e5 moves out of the way, defending the queen on f6. Of course, the idea of this move centrally is that if rook takes f6, taking the queen, what does black play? Exactly. Bishop takes g3 with check. And now when the king moves, you simply recapture the rook. And what have you gotten out of the exchange? A full rook. Black's up a rook and is winning the game. So you're actually defending your queen indirectly with the move knight g4. Here white's in big trouble. And of course, the other element of the attack is that playing knight g4 not only discovered an attack against the queen, but also opened up a discovered attack against the knight on c3. So the queen on f6 and the bishop on b8 are suddenly slicing into white's position with two discovered attacks. This is very unusual, where one move opens up two different types of discovery. White has to move his queen out of the way. He played queen f3. You see the move for black. No, that's not the best move. Try again. Piece of cake now. Queen takes c3 check. The second discovery couldn't be defended. Here he moves the king out of the way. Do you see what would happen after bishop d2? Very good. Queen takes a1. You win a rook with check. King d1. And now you have an option. When you think about this kind of position, it might be tempting to keep on taking material. But here, Kurs showed a cool, calm, solid mind. He didn't take the rook. He didn't want to allow queen f7 check. Here, white gets some counterplay. You're already up a piece. You don't need to be up that much material to win a game technically. Here, what you want to do, your only priority in this moment with black, is to stop white's play. Here, Kurs brought his most powerful piece back into the defense. Queen g7, completely stopping all of white's potential play. Spielman played queen e2, eyeing the e6 pawn. And now, remember that principle. When you're ahead in material, what do? You trade down. And when you're being attacked, what do? You trade down. In this position, black is ahead in material, he's up a full piece, and white's only hope is in attack, a counterattack. Put those ideas together, black decided to trade off white's remaining attacking piece on that open f-file. He played the move rook f8. He's willing to give up a pawn, maybe, in order to stop all the counterplay. Rook takes f8. King takes f8. White's most dangerous attacking piece is gone. Knight takes e6. He's given up that pawn, but again, remember that whole idea? When your opponent is attacking, you want to trade down, so you give him a pawn to trade down yet another piece. Bishop takes e6, and this also helps alleviate the pressure on black's developmental problem. Black only had one negative thing working against him in this position, which is that his rook on a8 was trapped in by the bishops, which were not developed yet. Bishop takes e6, gets rid of a piece, trades down the knight on g5. Queen takes e6, and now, here, black's up a piece. He plays a principled move again. Kurs made the principled decision. Knight f2 check, aiming to trade down again. Here, white played king e1. You see what happens if he plays king e2? Look for a fork. No, that's not the best move. Try again. Very good. Knight d4 check, forking the king and the queen. Okay, knight f2 check, king e1. If king e2, you have the fork knight d4 check. And after king e1, knight takes d3, another principal decision, getting rid of that last attacking piece. And here white resigned. After c takes d3, black has many options. You can play bishop g3 check, start an attack of your own. You can play queen takes a1 if you want to try to get materialistic. But in truth, the most technically correct move would be the simple queen e5. Check, trading down, queen takes, bishop takes. If you're confident in your endgame ability to win up a piece here, which should be very straightforward if you're a good endgame player, no problem. This was a wonderful, clear refutation of an over-aggressive opponent. But remember, there was a position I said we'd return to. Come back to this one. White just played f5. Black played the fantastic move bishop back to b8. And after f takes g6, knight d takes e5. You've already seen the game. You saw how white tried to continue with the attack, black easily stopped the attack, counterattacked, and won with this gorgeous central onslaught. Now, in this situation, white had a way of controlling the momentum of the game, stopping the downward spiral. He should have played queen g5 here. A simple move, offering a queen trade. White should have played queen g5, cutting his losses. In this situation, if he'd been in control of his psychology, he could have played this move. Now, if a move like f6 comes, then this g6 pawn is very interesting. White can just move his queen away. Black can play knight takes g6, and after bishop takes g6, queen takes g5, bishop takes g5, f takes g6. But now, white's alive. Sure, he's down a pawn, but he hasn't lost the game. If white had made this decision, if he had had presence of mind to admit he made a mistake, f5, when he played f5 it was premature, then he could have gathered himself, gotten it back together, and maybe defended an endgame. This is the kind of thing you have to do. So you think about how Kurs turned the psychological tide in this game. Spielman played a very aggressive move. Instead of getting disarmed by it, instead of getting nervous or thrown off by this incredibly aggressive thing coming at him, Kurs played the thoughtful, quiet move, bishop back to b8, stopping the attack, preparing a counterattack. That was the moment when Spielman, in turn, should have collected himself, realized, okay, I made a mistake. I'm going to accept the worst endgame, trade queens, stop black's attack, go into a position which maybe I'll be able to defend. Spielman was unable to do that. Clarity of mind is everything. And there is something beautiful about the clarity of mind apparent in Kurs' play. If you're a natural counterattacker, this is a fantastic game to use as a beacon in your training. When facing off against someone like Tal or Rudolf Spielman, you know they're going to come at you. They can be intimidating, or it can be turned to your advantage. There's something inherently risky about imposing your will on a chess position. If you violate the position, try to force something out of nothing, then a cool-headed opponent can pick apart your game. We should all be prepared to use adversity. This next game is a classic, rather poetic example of a stronger player turning a weaker opponent's over-exuberant aggression against itself. The virtuoso is Paul Morphy, one of the greatest American chess talents ever to live. Morphy was born in New Orleans in 1837, and by the age of 22, he was proclaimed by many to be the strongest chess player in the world. In this game, he was a teenager taking on a less skilled but highly excitable opponent. Watch how he sends a Roman queen back where she started. Morphy has the black pieces: e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Here Meek played d4, the Scotch, e takes d4, bishop c4, Morphy played bishop c5, and here Meek played the move knight g5, attacking the f7 pawn. Morphy defended with knight h6, and knight takes f7. So right away we can see that Meek is an aggressive guy. He wants to go right at it. His idea is setting up a fork, which is what happened after knight takes f7. Bishop takes f7. King takes f7. You see White's move here? You have a fork. Do you see a way to attack both the king and another piece? Meek played queen h5 check. Good. g6, and queen takes c5. So here the material is even. Morphy, remember, took a pawn early in the game. Meek has done this combination to win back the pawn, and we have a situation where Black's king is somewhat exposed, White's queen is somewhat exposed. It's on c5, and those of you who have seen the film Searching for Bobby Fischer know the idea you don't want to bring out the queen too early. Now, in some rare cases, it's okay. In this situation, the queen is going to become the pivotal weakness that Morphy takes advantage of. So in this kind of situation, what you want to do is think about two ideas. One is you want to develop your pieces quickly. You want to develop while kicking this white queen around. And also the queen is going to look to be checking. So you want to look for ways of kicking the queen, increasing your development, and responding to checks with other developmental moves. Also, you want to think about king safety. An idea in this kind of situation is to think about artificially castling. So if castling is this, artificially castling in this kind of position would be to play a move like rook f8 or rook to e8, followed by, if possible, your king coming back to g8. That way your king is relatively safe and you've castled artificially. Putting those ideas together, the move Morphy played was kicking the queen, preparing development, d6. Here, Meek played queen b5. If he had played queen c4 check or queen d5 check, Morphy's move would be very straightforward. Defend the check, kick the queen again with bishop to e6, and Black continues to play good chess. After queen b5, Morphy continued his development. Remember the idea I told you about? If he moves this rook, his king will be able to castle artificially if necessary. Also, White's king is still in the middle of the board. That pawn on e4 is hanging. Put those ideas together. Black to move. What do? Excellent. Rook e8. Attacking the e4 pawn, developing the rook. Perfect. Now, the truth of the matter is that this is one of those moments that White should have realized, okay, I'm getting into a little bit of trouble here. Black has his rook in the game, his knight in the game, his bishop and queen are getting ready to jump into the game. I better get my king to safety fast. Here, if White had castled, he might have been okay. He could have tried to regroup and play a chess game. But once again, we see a player caught up in his momentum, caught up in his exuberance, trying to make everything work, even when it's obviously not working. Queen b3 check. Yet another queen move. Now, what do? Well, in this case, the natural move would be to play bishop e6, defending the check and attacking the queen. There's two negative sides to this move. First of all, it hangs the pawn on b7, and second of all, it blocks our rook's attack on the e4 pawn. So that's not the right move. Now, we are attacking this pawn on e4. The ideal response to an opponent's aggressive move, a check or a threat, is to simultaneously defend against that attack and make a move which helps our counterattacking idea. The e4 pawn is a weakness. We're under check. Is there a way to get out of the check and increase the attack eventually on that e4 pawn? No, that's not the best move. Try again. 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 Well, in this case, the natural move would be to play bishop e6, defending the check and attacking the queen. There's two negative sides to this move. First of all, it hangs the pawn on b7, and second of all, it blocks our rook's attack on the e4 pawn. So that's not the right move. Now, we are attacking this pawn on e4. The ideal response to an opponent's aggressive move, a check or a threat, is to simultaneously defend against that attack and make a move which helps our counterattacking idea. The e4 pawn is a weakness. We're under check. Is there a way to get out of the check and increase the attack eventually on that e4 pawn? d5, an excellent move. Once again, blocking the threat. If queen takes d5, notice, of course, that after queen takes d5, white can't recapture because that pawn is pinned to the king. So now we've stopped the check. We're on that e4 pawn again. Black can play rook takes e4, next move. Here, once again, white should have realized, I'm getting into big trouble here. Get my king to safety, cut my losses, try to defend. He should have castled. Bring his bishop and knight into the game, maybe he can survive. But no. Meek played f3, trying to hold everything together. And now Morphy went after him. Notice, we want to play the move d takes e4. We can't play that move because of a very simple reason. The white queen on b3 is pinning the pawn on d5. So the question next logically is, how do we get rid of that queen? No problem. attack the queen, free up our d5 pawn, open up the center, and go after the white king. That's our plan. Black to move. What should you do? Knight a5. Very good. Attacking the white queen. When the queen moves, the e4 pawn's going to go. Here, he played queen d3, defending that pawn. Again, he's trying to hold everything up in the air. Here, Morphy played d takes e4, f takes e4, and now, white got aggressive. He started early. He played a combination. His queen has been jumping all over the board. Now his king is stuck in the middle. It's opening up. Black to play. You have a good fork here. What's your best move? Queen h4 check. Excellent. Now if the king moves, the e4 pawn goes. Here Meek blocked the check. He played g3. Now, once again, you're Morphy. Black to play. Do we want to take that pawn with the queen or with the rook? Once again, we're going to rely on the chess principles to help us figure out the answer. What's the material here? Okay, black has 6 pawns. White has 6 pawns as well. So black's about to take a pawn. So from one perspective, trading off queens might not be a bad move because we're going to be up material. We know when we're ahead of material, we want to trade down pieces. But in this position, there's a factor which is much, much more important than the pawn advantage, and that's the white king. Another principle which we know is when you're attacking, don't trade queens. Don't trade material because it cuts off your attack. In this situation, white is in desperate straits. We have all the development. All of our pieces are ready to leap into the game. The thing to do here is keep on going with the attack. Don't trade off. The correct move is rook takes e4 check. Very often we'll have two principles competing against one another. That's when you have to use your chess intuition. Decide which principle is more relevant to this position. In this case, the white king's lack of safety is so loud, so pronounced. It shouldn't be too hard to make the decision. Rook takes e4 check. King f2. Now, once again, you're Morphy. What do you play? Well, think about it. Your queen is attacked on h4. Your rook is also attacked on e4. So you need to move the queen to a square, which also defends the rook on e4. The only other alternative would be queen f6, but then white can block the check with queen f3 and offer a queen trade, which we don't want to do because we have this big attack. So what Morphy played was queen e7, defending the rook, getting the queen out of attack, preparing ultimately an infiltration along the light squares. For example, a move like bishop g4 followed by rook e2 check. After queen e7, Meek played knight d2. Once again, you're Paul Morphy. Black to play. Use the principles. What do you do? Well, one principle, what has white just left behind? Well, white's bishop was guarding the e3 square. He attacked our rook. Knight d2 attacks the rook on e4, but he blocked his bishop's defense of the e3 square, which we can enter now. That's one factor. Another factor is removing the defender. We want to play rook e2 check, entering into the position, making the queen and rook harmonize beautifully, helping this light square invasion we have planned. Put those two ideas together. Use the e3 square to kick the white queen away from defending the e2 square. If you think in that principled manner, the first move is obvious. Rook e3. Now white has to move the queen somewhere while defending the e2 square. He plays a move like queen takes d4, rook e2 check is going to open up a deadly attack. For example, rook e2, the king goes back. You can play rook e1, the king goes back, and then you can play queen e2 check. The only move for white is to block that. And now, can you remove the defender of that white queen? Take a look. The queen is defended by the king. Is there a move that black can play to force the king away from that defense? Very good. Bishop h3 check. The king has to take. King takes h3. Queen takes f2. And you've won a queen. So here Meek made a move that gets out of the attack of the rook and defends the e2 square, which is absolutely necessary. He plays queen b5. Now continue your attack in a principled manner. We want that e2 square. Can you kick the white queen away again? c6, a simple move. a6 or bishop d7 would have done a similar thing. No problem. Morphy played c6. Now, Meek played the move queen to f1. Once again, we see if queen takes a5, black can win by force. What do you do here? Rook e2 check. King f1. If king g1, we can play queen e3 check. And after king f1, bring another piece into the game. Bishop to h3 check. King g1. And now mate in 1. Queen e3, checkmate. Good job. So here, queen to f1. The only square that maintains defense of that critical e2 square. Now, once again, you're Morphy. Black to move. You know the critical themes of the position. We've been talking about it so far. Your move, what do you do? Well, think about it. We need to take away the queen's defense of the e2 square. How do you do it? Very good. Morphy played the fabulous move, bishop to h3. You see the idea? If queen takes h3, what do you play now? No, that's not the best move. Try again. Absolutely. Rook e2 check. King g1. Now what? Right. Queen e3 check. And after king f1, do you see mate in 1 here? Excellent. Queen f2, checkmate. After rook e2 check, the other option would be to play king f3. Now, put yourself once again in Morphy's shoes. Remember what I've told you before. The key to winning this kind of position is to chase the king up the board. Black to play. You see mate? Here you can jump the queen in, queen e3 check, king g4. Now what? There you go. h5 check is fine. And after king h4, do you see checkmate? Very good. Queen e7 is checkmate in one move. So returning to this position, after bishop h3, this poor white queen has been chased all over the board. It cannot give up the defense of the e2 square. Can't play queen takes h3 because of forced mate. The only move to maintain control of the e2 square is queen d1. And now think about that poor queen. She's moved 8 times all over the board, and she ends up on the exact same square as she started. Here Morphy played a very strong move, bringing his remaining piece into the attack. What's the one piece that hasn't functioned yet? This rook here. What do? Rook to f8. Beautiful. Rook e8 is also tempting. That's fine. Preparing rook e2 check. It would have been winning as well. Morphy played rook f8, and after knight f3, here Morphy ended with an artistic flair. Black to move. What would you play? No, that's not the best move. Try again. 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 Very good. Well, he wants to make this rook on f8 function. He could have played king g8, but instead he chose to end with a lot of artistry. He played king to e8. The king returns to his original square after the white queen has been forced to return to her original square, and here white was forced to resign. It's all over. Of course, after bishop takes e3, this is checkmate. The f3 knight can't be defended anymore. If white wants to, he can pile up on it again. There's nothing for white to do here. It's all over. So white began this game with a bang, playing for a combination, ripping his queen into the battle. But Morphy calmly refuted his opponent's attacking ideas while building his counterattack and kicking the queen all over the board. Eventually, after moving 8 times, the poor white queen is forced back to her starting square, the perfect example of unsound aggression being turned back upon itself.